recording. This is going to be a fairly short class because what I'm wanting to do is just kind of tie a bow on, that's not our stuff. You know I talk about law all the time, but that's not our stuff. So today, what we're going to do is we're going to tie the bow on Module 3. And I sent you guys the study guide. And I know it's kind of short, but there's 18 questions that are going to be on the Module 3 test. And it's a mixture of multiple choice, matching, multi-select, fill in the blank, and multi-short answer. So it's not going to be all essay like I've done in the past. So so breathe a sigh of relief. Go, oh, thank God. So there's a few multiple choice or multi-select questions from the Vaughn, Voss, and Shum book, specifically from Chapter 5, Chapter 6, Chapter 7, and Chapter 8. And these aren't going to be real detailed, they're more general. So, but you, again, remember, this is, you can use whatever materials that you need to for the test. Also, all the lectures we have in class are going to be included in some information. And I post all those in your news feed, so you can go back and review those and review all the PowerPoints and stuff that's been there. But I do want to touch base with you guys on a couple things. First off, let's talk about specific learning disability. Remember, it's a psychological it's a disorder of the psychological process that causes students to have a difficulty in doing reading, math, speaking, writing, etc. Right? But there are 8 different learning disability categories that are identified in the IDEA. We talked about those, and it will be a question. So the 8 areas, they're broken down into 3 broad areas. We've got reading, 4 broad areas, I'm sorry, reading, math, writing, and communication. So as we break these down, in reading we have basic reading skills, and that takes into the big 5. Remember the big 5? It was phonemic awareness, and phonics. Then you have reading comprehension, and again, that's broken down into the vocabulary and comprehension. And then you have reading fluency. And that goes with fluency on the big 5. So there's the big 5, and they're addressed in reading. And in math, you have math problem solving, and you have math calculation. Remember? Okay. And writing It's this written expression is the writing portion. And then communication is oral expression. And listening, comprehension. So those are the 8 areas, or 7 areas, 8. 8 areas of 8 specific learning disabilities. So that, remember, SLD, specific learning disability, these are the 8 areas. And the student must show weaknesses in the areas, and you can identify them as specific. That you can have a student with just one of these, or they can have all 7 of these. You know, you'll see different ranges of kids. Very often, the math problem solving is associated with reading because it's most likely associated with word problems. You know, 2 trains are headed for Topeka, Kansas, and one left this town at this time going this much speed, and another one left this town at this one. Yeah, that's a math problem solving thing, right? And that takes into consideration the ability to read and comprehend and understand the vocabulary, those things. Math calculations is the number pieces. And remember, here's an interesting thing. This is processed through the occipital lobe, whereas this would be processed through the frontal lobe, the temporal lobe, and the parietal lobe of the brain. So it's kind of an interesting thing. Math is a more comprehensive area that uses more of the brain than reading does. And remember, reading is a co-opted process, as according to Dr. Souza. So it's kind of an interesting thing how that all works out. This will be a process like it'll be either one of the matching or fill in the blanks or something like that questions on the test. So that's important for you to remember. Okay. Any questions on the specific learning disability piece? All right. So now then, I'm going to share my screen because I want to talk about we also, one of the other disability categories we talked about in this was other health impairments. Remember, it is a chronic or an acute health problem that caused OHI, let me go back, let's start over. OHI means having a limited strength, vitality, alertness that adversely affects a child's education or performance. It's, let's pull up the exact wording and idea. It is due to a chronic or acute health problem, such as asthma, attention deficit disorder, etc., that causes a student to have an adversely affected educational performance. And remember, it goes on. The term includes limited alertness, includes a heightened alertness to environmental stimuli that result in a limited alertness with respect to the educational environment. In other words, kids that are ADHD that are hyper-focused and hyper-alert and are distracted by things, that's included in this. So that's why we have ADHD, Tourette syndrome. And remember, a medical doctor must be involved in the diagnosis of this specific specific disability category. Remember that, okay? All right. So there'll be a question about some questions about OHI. There'll be some quite specific multiple choice questions from your reading about ADHD. So that'll be and learning disability in there. So there'll be some specific things about that. All right, now I'm going to unshare my screen, because now then we talked about behavior. Remember, that was emotional disturbance. And we talked about how the characteristics. You will need to know the 5 characteristics in IDEA for emotional disturbance. That will be one of the big questions. Okay. Also, remember we talked about reinforcement and punishment. Remember? And remember that reinforcement and punishment both have a positive and a negative piece, or 2 pieces, positive and negative. Who can tell me my definition, Dr. Dennis's definition of reinforcement? Now remember this when I wrote it up over there. Say again? It increases a behavior, so that's important. Reinforcement will always increase a behavior. That's the intent of reinforcement, correct? What's the intent of punishment? To decrease a behavior. So now then, if we're going to, let's talk about positive. What is positive in this sense? Not meaning good or bad, but what does it mean in this sense? Adding something. So positive reinforcement means to add something to increase a behavior, right? You guys online got it? What is negative? Remove. It's not good or bad. Remember, it means to add or subtract. So positive reinforcement is to increase a behavior. Negative reinforcement is remove something to increase a behavior. What about punishment? What can we say about positive punishment? Add to do what? To decrease the behavior. And negative is to remove, to decrease a behavior, right? So that will be, definitely will be a question. Okay. Also, there's going to be a question for you. There'll be a scenario of a child's behavior in the classroom, and then there'll be 4 questions. You'll need to identify the behavior and tell me what the antecedent was, what the behavior was, and what the consequence was. So that'll be there too. So so let's review the antecedent. The antecedent's the A, behavior is the B, and C is the consequence. What does antecedent mean? And in this case, I'm not worried about setting antecedents, I'm triggering antecedents. So antecedent means what happened right before the identified behavior. That's the antecedent. For example, giving somebody a difficult assignment to do independently. The behavior is what the student did. Let's say he yelled out to get, he yelled out, and the student yelled out in class, and the consequence is what happens right after the behavior. That's the consequence. So let's say, given a hard assignment, independent, the student yelled out, and his peers laughed, and teacher said, oh, blah, 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 whatever your name is. What would be the function of that behavior? Get attention. Very good, Carson. All right, so that will be one of the questions. You'll read the scenario, and you will need to identify what was the function of what was the antecedent, what was the behavior, what was the consequence, and what was the function of behavior. The reason that is the piece that I brought forward for the test is because that's what I want you to take away from the ED category. All behavior serves a function. All behavior has a purpose. It's either to get something or to avoid something. And it could be that he yelled out and the teacher sent him to the office where he got no attention. If that was that, then that would be escape, correct? So that's the important piece on that. So then there'll be some questions on speech and language. Speech and language impairments. Remember, we talk about speech is more about the fluency, voice, and articulation. Fluencies like stuttering or clicking, different things like that. That's fluency. These are not related to a language problem. Then you have language disorders, syntax, comprehension, and expression. These are all language disorders that it'll associate with reading later on. But syntactical problems, comprehension problems, understanding language, and expressing language. And those are the things that there'll be some multiple choice questions about speech and language impairments. So remember, speech and language impairments, specific learning disability, other health impaired, and ED were the 4 disability categories that we covered in this module. They will be assessed in the test. Any questions? I just wanted to tie it up for you guys, and those are the takeaways for this module. I appreciate you coming. I think this will be good. I've recorded this, so if you want to go back and listen to it again to kind of get the summary. But you guys will do well on the test. I totally believe that. All right. If you guys online have any questions for me, you can email me, and we will talk soon. I will see you guys on Tuesday. See you guys virtually on Tuesday. See you guys on Tuesday face-to-face or virtually. I'll see you guys soon.